All right, good morning. Thanks for having me. I'm going to talk to you today essentially about three key areas around the changing consumer decision journey. First, I'm going to give you a bit of a setting of the scene in terms of why is this important, why do we need to think about consumer decision making, and why is it changing. Second, I'm going to go into what I call 7 key themes around the consumer decision making journey and essentially what's driving change for consumers today. And finally, I'm going to stop with a bit of a where to from here and look forward around some of the trends and technologies that we're seeing impact a range of different markets around the world and a range of different industries, categories, and brands. The ACRS is the Australian Consumer Retail and Services Research Unit. We're based within the Department of Marketing at Monash University, and we do a range of consulting and thought leadership work, and it's a pleasure to be here today. First of all, why disruption? You hear about this term a lot. It's frequently mentioned in the press and your organizations. We hear about everything being disrupted. And I think one of the key things to kind of take stock of first is that disruption's not new, particularly in retail or consumer-facing industries. If you look back to the early 80s when barcode scanners came into the market, that revolutionized the way staff operated in stores. So no longer did you need to take a gun and put a price tag on every single product in the store, but you had these scanners that kept the price and the code for every single item, and you could take those items to the checkout. And that really had an impact on the way in which staff were used in retail space. We then had, into the late 90s and early 2000s, a range of technologies that still disrupt us today and categories today, from the internet to Google to Amazon, and we all hear about Amazon coming to the Australian market, PayPal in terms of payment methods, and payment methods are continuing to be disrupted. We're moving into what we call biometric payment systems now, where they read either your fingerprint or your retina. Mobile devices, and the mobile device is the device that consumers use essentially as the remote control of their lives. It's the device that you always have on you. You're searching for product information, you're searching for locations of stores, you're searching for competitor information, and you're running everything from that remote control. And there's no doubt that that device will change, and that will not, the mobile phone will also be disrupted. And what's the next innovation? We then had a range of different social channels come to the market, and brands rushed to develop social strategies and move into social platforms, many of them not necessarily knowing why they were operating in social platforms. It's fair to say that now there's been a lot of research done in terms of social media and the efficacy of social media for brands and reaching consumers, and what we're finding is that social channels are really about creating conversations, not necessarily about selling product. In terms of converting consumers to purchase through social channels, the numbers are relatively low. There is also a stream of research that suggests that traditional channels are coming back. So media, TV, outdoor, newspaper advertising, these channels that we thought were dying are actually starting to come back, and consumers are placing a high importance on those channels. And one of the main reasons for that we've seen with all this fake news and social media and what can we trust from social channels. So there's a trust issue going on with channels at the moment, and brands are struggling to kind of realign the value of these channels and build them into a broader mix. We then more recently have had things like wearable technology, so devices like watches, Apple Watches for instance, and we're seeing brands in the US that are actually equipping their staff with these devices and then connecting them to almost loyalty programs and systems to be able to provide information about staff that they're dealing with in real time. So I can walk into a store, have a conversation with the sales associate, they can ask me for my loyalty card number. Into their watch comes up all the information about my past purchases, and they're able to make recommendations about the products that I would most likely buy. And what's really intelligent about this is that not only is it using an algorithm to understand what I'll most likely like, but it's doing that from the stock that's available within the store. Or it's making a recommendation about how to get that stock to me as fast as possible, be it delivered to my home, to a distribution center, or to the store that I'm standing in. And then we're seeing politics disrupted, and there's no doubt that we're seeing this global shift in terms of isolation, kind of protectionism, borders being closed, and systems changing. So I think that disruption is not something that's new, it's something that's constant, and it's something that we're dealing with today and will continue to deal with. What I think's really interesting though is that when you think about all these disruptions, a lot of them are based on technology. I was lucky enough late last year to attend a presentation by this man who's one of the co-founders of string theory. He describes his day job as continuing the work of Albert Einstein. He's trying to develop an equation of everything, which is kind of confusing, but he's a physicist, theoretical physicist, and he talks about the fact that humans are descendants from hunters and gatherers, and essentially that we have this desire to touch products. We have this desire to be in physical space. So I think you hear a lot about, will stores be replaced by people sitting on their couches and buying products online? His argument is no. Essentially, we will always have a desire to frequent physical space. Retail stores are here to stay. And also he makes the point that this is one of the reasons why the paperless office is never taken off, because people still have this desire to print out paper, to touch and to feel. I brought about a year ago an iPad Pro, and my vision was that that was going to replace reading paper. I'm yet to do that. I still read paper, and my iPad Pro sits in my bag. I've used it about 3 times in the last year. So I kind of resonate with this quote. It also comes down to, if you think about consumer behavior in terms of their preferences for picking fruit and vegetables, we have this desire to choose our own products, to see it, to touch it, to feel it, which is one of the reasons, or one of the barriers in terms of online shopping with taking fresh produce to consumers through online channels. We are, however, seeing a massive increase in trust through online channels, and we're seeing this nowhere else as much as in countries like China. Maserati partnered with Tmall, so Tmall, the kind of Alibaba massive online marketplace in China, to launch a product, a new Maserati. They sold 100 cars in, can anyone yell out how many seconds? Oh, sorry, I gave that away. How long? 8 seconds, right? 100 cars, and these cars are over $100,000, were sold within 8 seconds. So a massive trust in the online channel and a massive willingness to actually make large investments in online. I speak to a lot of retailers, and they talk about, the fear of foreign competition coming into the market, and, Zara's coming, H&M's coming, Amazon's coming, the different retailer every week as to who's coming. But I think the opportunity is really for us to take our products to the world. And following on from the last presentation, there is a massive opportunity to move into new markets. If you drew a circle above Australia, you'd find that 50% of the world's population live within that circle. So we have this amazing access to this amazing market, China, that's growing at a rapid rate and has this massive demand for not only our products, but also this willingness and trust in online. The other really interesting thing we're seeing in terms of disruption is this move towards access over ownership. And we're seeing this disruption in a range of different categories. Uber, for instance. I heard a great quote. In 20 years from now, people will think, how could people have lived 20 years ago and owned a car and not actually earned an income from it as well, or owned a house and not earned an income from it as well. So these categories, Airbnb, Ubers, are disrupting everything in terms of the way in which we think about our assets and the way in which we use them. And that's going to continue into a whole range of different categories, from peer-to-peer lending to everything in between. So I think disruption is rife, and technology is really underpinning this notion of disruption, however it's not new. I'm going to move now into what I call the 7 key themes influencing consumer decision-making. I'm going to set them up in terms of a framework, so SCAMPER, Scamper. Hopefully 1, so you can remember these themes, and 2, to give me a structure to talk to you. The S relates to what I call simplify. We're seeing a lot of brands coming to the markets and thinking that they need to be complicated in the way in which they deal with consumers. They're trying to almost be more complicated than they need to be. There's a lot of research that suggests that consumers are actually seeking simplified experiences. There's research that was conducted 10, 15 years ago now. It was a very simple experiment in marketing. And consumers were provided with, there was different scenarios, and in one situation after a purchase, they were offered a free chocolate from a choice of around 15 different chocolate types. In another situation, consumers were offered a free choice of a chocolate from a more limited choice set of about 3. What they found when they looked at all the results across hundreds of different people is that when a smaller choice set was given to consumers, more people made a choice. So what's interesting there, and what's subsequently the theory that's been developed, is that too much choice is actually a bad thing. What too much choice does is it decreases consumers' willingness to, 1, make a choice, and when we do make a choice, what we find is that we feel that the other choices that we've given up may have been better than the choice that we've taken. So we get this feeling of post-dissonance regret. So if you can simplify the consumer decision-making journey or simplify choices for consumers, you actually end up with a higher level of purchase. And if you look at stores like Aldi, this is their strategy. They have a refined set of products within this broader store, and you can, you walk in, you see each category, but a limited number of choices within that category, as opposed to walking in and seeing, 80 different types of olive oil. simplicity extends to a range of different brands, and if you think of some of the more complicated store environments, like for instance, we've got IKEA here. You walk into an IKEA, hands up who gets lost in the maze on the racetrack. A few of you, yep. I kind of have this love-hate passion with IKEA. I hate the fact that when I walk in there, I feel like it's 3 hours before I get out of the store, but I love the fact that you don't see products stacked from floor to ceiling. You see rooms curated. And I think there's something nice in that notion of curation. So how can you put products together in a space or in a way that consumers can be inspired to see how those products fit into their own life? How can that fit into my house? How can that product fit into my life? So brands are looking to that notion of developing a curated story. And in fact, there's a store in New York in the meatpacking district that is actually called Story, the bottom middle picture there. And that store is really interesting in that they call themselves more of they take on the notion of being curated and more of a magazine. So they create what they call editorial content as opposed to just product or transactional content. Every 6 weeks, that store environment changes, and that changes along a particular theme. So the themes are typically sponsored by manufacturer brands. For instance, they had a theme that was sponsored by Gillette, and the theme was Story Man. And everything in the store was one around the lifestyles associated with the Gillette brand. But you could walk in and have a barber cut, a shave. All these different things were coming in to augment the experience and create this holistic environment focused on that one theme. The C in the scamper relates to convenience, and we are seeing this massive demand from consumers for convenience in a range of different aspects in their lives. We're seeing, as I mentioned, technology being used and augmented by physical sales associates to enhance the customer experience, as for instance the iPhone example, sorry, the iWatch example, Apple Watch example I spoke of, which was actually an American Apparel in the US. Also, high fashion brand Tory Burch was actually one of the first to move into this space and developed what they called Client Book, which was an iPad app with that exact system where you could walk in, find out information, give your name to the sales associate, and that sales associate finds out information about you and makes recommendations. I heard a great speech from the creator, the head of marketing at Tory Burch, who spoke about that system and told a story of a man who came into the Tory Burch store, said to the sales associate, "I don't exactly know what you sell, but I see your name on my credit card statement a lot, so obviously my wife loves your store. It's our 40th wedding anniversary and I'm looking for a gift." He was able to look at his wife's past purchase behavior and make a recommendation about what she would like, to the point that about 2 weeks later, the wife came back in, found the sales associate and said, "Thank you so much. It's the first time in 40 years where my husband's brought me a gift that I actually like." So you can really use technology to assist and augment that human-to-human interaction. I think people are really afraid of technology replacing humans. I think it's not about replacing humans. We will see some jobs replaced, but technology and robotics will essentially look to augment the human-to-human interaction at the customer coalface. Oops. I don't know if I can go back. Sorry. We're also seeing this notion around robotics in terms of the future of what we call conversational commerce. You may have heard about bots, B-O-T-S, chatbots, and they're essentially they're being used in